Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In this week's video, I'm super excited to talk a little bit about my own journey of how I went completely against the grain as a Middle Eastern woman and was practically outcasted by my community for a period of my life, and as well as how you, who are the black sheep listening to this, can also stop living for others and start living for yourself. Okay, so let's talk about my journey as a Middle Eastern woman who went completely against the grain in my community and was practically outcasted for a period of my life growing up, and also how that actually led to growth and liberation in my own family's journey. And so I want to talk a little bit about growing up. So I'm Kurdish Iraqi, and I come from a pretty traditional background where women are taught to behave a certain way. And I'm sure that so many of you listening to this who come from different, immigrant backgrounds can also relate to this. I was taught that being a woman meant that I had to speak, act, behave, and live my life according to the rules of my culture. And I used to watch, so many of the girls in my community adhere to these rules, and they would play almost like the good girl role, but I could see that behind all of that deep down, and this, even some of them would come to me, saying how unfulfilled they felt, how they didn't want to do any of those things, but they felt obliged to because it was expected of them. And it was expected of me as well. I grew up in a family that, luckily, and I want to say luckily, that my parents actually were a lot less traditional compared to, many of the other families that I grew up in seeing and witnessing and being friends with. Luckily, my parents were activists. And so, they were humanitarian. For them, it was all about freedom of speech and freedom of, being in truth. However, with that being said, they were still heavily part of the community that we were in. And so they still felt this responsibility to adhere a lot of those values and instill those, and also to instill them into my sister and I. And so, as much as they were on the humanitarian side, there were still some things that showed up where, women had to follow, girls had to follow, this way of living. And so, it was really challenging because we moved here to Canada when I was about 6 years old, and my parents were still trying to figure out life, and they're still trying to they were at a point where we had just escaped. We came as asylum seekers, escaping war, escaping, seeking refuge after my parents were detained for being activists against the regime at the time. And so there was just a lot to navigate. And I grew up in this, weird phase of I didn't really know who I was or where I was from, or where I wanted to be from. And so I had to, play a role inside my house, and then I had to play a role outside of my house, in school and with friends and all of that. And I went through a major identity crisis, and I didn't really understand who I was growing up and how I was kind of, in between these different ways of life, you know? And I remember kind of, just saying to my parents, like, I'm not Kurdish. I don't want to be Kurdish because I'm in Canada now, and I wanted so badly to fit into my environment and to have friends, that would accept me and not call me weird. And I remember very vividly this experience at school where, and this was in grade one. It's actually really fucking hilarious. My mom went out and bought me this two-piece velvet vest and oversized green shorts, like matching green vest and shorts. And she's like, "You're going to wear this to school." And I'm looking at it and I'm like, "Oh my God, that's going to be like the end of me." I'm going to get so bullied for this. But, my mom didn't know. And of course, she was just trying to, just trying to do the best that she could. And I remember people just making fun of me at school for wearing this outfit and just saying like I'm poor and that that I'm like an immigrant and that I don't have style and my parents don't have money and all of this stuff. And kids can be fucking mean, hey? Like damn, like I used to think about it. I was like, they don't hold back. Like kids don't hold back. They say what's on their mind. And I guess to some degree we could actually learn from that too as adults. But it was rough. And I remember just going home crying, and saying like, I don't care, like I'm never wearing this again. And I'm never listening to like you guys, like saying this to my parents, and I'm just gonna do my own thing from now on, and all that. And that was me trying to rebel, against uh, just in general, because of this identity crisis and this longing for belonging that I had. And that was kind of like what started it. And then from there on, I never aligned with a lot of the values that my parents had instilled in me or attempted to instill in me as a girl. And I want to say primarily on my mom's side because my mom grew up, with her own traditions, and she is a woman, she is a girl, was a girl at some point. And so, she was just doing what she was taught by her own mom. And I remember like, we'd have a lot of gatherings and guests coming over, for dinner and things like that. And I was expected to serve tea and I was expected to serve food and to sit at the corner and wait until everyone else ate, and then I would have to like come in and eat. And it was just this like good girl role that I did not I did not align with whatsoever. And I used to see a lot of the girls my age too growing up doing the same thing, right? Playing the role. And that's fine, worked out. I mean, I don't know how it worked out for them. To be honest, most of them fucking probably hated it, but they did it because they had to and, all that. But I said no. I was like, I'm not doing any of this shit. Like, I don't care how I'm perceived, I don't care how the community looks at me and what they have to say. And I just never subscribed to a lot of what I was taught. And growing, as I got older, I really felt I fell into a rebellious state. And I remember, even just going to these like community parties and stuff. I never wanted to wear the traditional clothes. And I just, I went really extreme into the rebelliousness of, I don't know if that's a word, but, into the rebelling of my culture and my traditions. And I just, I would hang out with people that were not from my culture. I would always bring, my Spanish friends, and I would bring all these random friends from school to these community parties. And all the women and the girls in my community would look at me and just be like, "Oh my God, like what is she doing? Like why is she bringing these people?" And she just doesn't fit. She doesn't fit here. And my parents used to give me so much shit for that. But I knew in my heart that I just was different. I knew that I was the black sheep in some way, in that I just wasn't willing to follow. And that's a really, really brave thing to do in my culture as a woman, growing up with, in an environment of these stern traditions. And this, it was not easy growing up in that and making the choice to move differently and to say, no, nope, I'm not going to do that. And in my heart, I knew I was always this leader. I knew that I was, called to do something different. I knew it from the moment, I gotta say, the moment I even just could comprehend this world and this reality, I knew that I was meant for something else than the environment I had been surrounded in. And this came to when I was 19. And when I was 19, I dropped out of college because I decided that it was not going to be the path I was going to take, and that nothing about my life was going to be traditional. And I knew it. And so here I am, again in that rebellious state. And my parents were pissed. My parents were so disappointed because that's what girls do, right? They go to school, get the degree, get married, have the kids, take care of their parents, fall back into that same cycle of what we've been taught in our tradition. And so, me not choosing to continue college was like the catastrophe of my parents' lifetime. It was this really, really bad thing to them. And they, and of course I get it, they were scared and they were like, well, I just want her to, you know, be secure and have a secure life. But I knew I didn't want that. And then I ended up making a bunch of money because I worked after school and I would grind, during high school, and I made some money and I saved up some money. And my mom was like, oh, like you're going to invest you're going to buy a property. And I'm like, nope, I'm also not going to do that. And I booked a one-way flight to Australia when I turned 20. And I ended up traveling with a backpack during that for about 4 to 6 months between Australia and Southeast Asia. And I saw the world and I got to know myself, and just my eyes opened up, and I knew I had this longing to explore and see the world and learn. And I was so curious about God, and I was curious about, you know, all of the things. And I remember that me choosing to drop out of college and and take all the money that I had saved to put it towards this backpacking trip versus investing it in a property. At that age, can you fucking believe that our parents actually expect us to like buy an apartment at 19, 20? Like, what the fuck? It's crazy to me. But anyway, I get it, but I remember the day that I had my flight to go to Australia. My mom actually looked at me with disgust and did not say goodbye and just said, "Don't call me." And I remember how hurt I was, but I had my little sister who ended up coming with me to the airport. And that was like my favorite memory of our relationship. It was so beautiful to just, have her on my side, especially when I felt like everyone else in the whole community and all my parents were just completely against my choices and who I was choosing to become as a woman. And to them, again, a 20-year-old woman in our culture does not go traveling by herself. You travel when you're married, you travel when you finally get into a relationship, you know? And that was like, again, that was like really starting to test, all that I had ever grown up to believe in my values. And so, time and time, I had to step into these acts of courage to say, no, I'm not doing it this way, you know? And so I ended up traveling, and my mom, didn't end up speaking to me for that whole period. And I came back and I ended up saying, I'm moving out. I was like, I think late, I think it was, yeah, I was still in my 20s. I'm moving out and I'm going to live in Toronto. And I'm not going to stay, in the city where I grew up, Vancouver, anymore. And again, my mom, are you fucking kidding me? And it was just this constant challenging the norm, challenging tradition, challenging all that I had been taught to believe that I was in the way that I was supposed to lead my life. And so I ended up moving to Toronto, and I brought my sister with me too. I was like, we're going to both live there. And we ended up living there. And from there, it went to the next level where I was like, I don't think I want to live in Canada anymore. I'm going to move to Dubai. And my mom at this point has just lost it. Like, she's like, you're disowned. Like, I don't know what I'm doing with you anymore. Like, are you kidding me? You're going to move to the Middle East? And she's like, why couldn't you just stay Middle Eastern in our household? This is where you're from, anyways. And now you're going to move there on your own without knowing anybody at the age of 20. I think it was 22. And I was like, yep, I want to live in Dubai. And I moved there. And at this point, like, the entire community I'd grown up in was literally telling their daughters to have nothing to do with me. Like, I remember, like, I kid you not, I remember like my mom just telling me, like, like some of the other mothers I've been talking to are just telling their daughters, like, to not have you on social media and to not have any contact with you because you are going to destroy them and you are going to, be this bad influence. And I was always perceived as like the bad influence. And it's very funny because, like, I never grew up like doing drugs or any of that crazy stuff. But just because I chose to be different in living in my truth and leading with my heart and, saying no to what didn't align to me in what I had been grown up to believe was how women live, just because of that act of rebelliousness, uh, I was perceived as this really bad woman. I was this bad girl that nobody comes close to, and nobody wanted to bring their daughters near me. And I just didn't care. I didn't give a shit. I was like, fuck it. Like, I don't really care if these people accept me or not. And I ended up moving to Dubai and, grew up in Dubai. And then I ended up going back home to Kurdistan. And I just remember, like, everyone there just being like, like, you're not married yet. Like, you're in your late 20s and you're turning, like, you're not married and all this stuff. And I actually remember one of my relatives making a joke that was not so much a joke. And I remember him saying, at this point, you're expired. No man is going to want you because you're expired. You got an expiration date and you are way past it. And I just remember, like, looking at him and thinking to myself, like, my God, Like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, what are we doing in this culture? Like, where have we got it so twisted? And, and I should say there were still aspects where I felt alienated. I felt unworthy. I had all of that I had to battle. I had to work through so much of that because I was constantly, my external environment and my community and everybody around me was constantly reminding me of the choices that I made that did not fit and that I did not belong. And so, all of that just kind of led to who I am today. And I'm so fucking proud of myself for having the courage growing up to lead my own life and to do things my own way. And I knew that my soul was being prepared. I was being prepared to step into the leadership that this world needs. And not by telling people what to do. I will never do that. It's more around coming to just the embodiment of leading myself, of having my own authority and having my own power and listening to my heart and listening to my voice and living in my truth and living authentically, where I get to live the life and the reality that I want. And what's really funny about all of this is my mom actually came back to me a few years ago and said, "Do you remember the time where I told you that if you leave the door and go to Australia, that you are not my daughter anymore and that I will never speak to you?" And I told her, "Yep, I remember." I very much remember that. She said, "Thank you for not listening to me." Whew, I have fucking goosebumps. Like, when I heard her say those words, I knew in my heart that everyone in my community and that all the people in my space needed me to rebel, to remind them that they too have a choice, that they too don't have to live for other people, that they too get to be the authority in their own lives. And she said, "Thank you for not listening to me. I'm so glad that you actually did the things that your heart told you to do. As hard as it was for you to go against the grain, I'm so glad that you chose to listen to yourself because it has made you the woman that you are today and the woman that I am so proud of." And this is where I get emotional. And to hear that from my mom, knowing that growing up, I felt like I was constantly disappointing her, to hear that was everything to me. And as a result of that, I actually started, and as I went out and started creating content and I started speaking my truth and I started going out there, it's crazy because I started to get all these messages from the girls in my community that I grew up in who were like, "Thank you. Like you're an inspiration. Like, thank you for, for going against the grain. Thank you for having your own voice. Thank you for, speaking up now." It's really refreshing to see that another Kurdish girl out there is is doing something different and that she's actually out there, using her voice. And they were thinking, I was getting all these messages and I'm like, whoa, this is fucking cool. I was like, this is fucking cool. All the girls that I grew up with inside this community that were told they had to be a certain way and that I was not aligning with and chose not to be that way were messaging me today saying, thank you for not fitting in. Thank you for not fitting in. And that brings me to my message for you all listening today. You don't need to fit in. You never have. You never have needed to fit in. I don't know what your cultural background is. I don't know what community you're a part of. I don't know what your family situation looks like. I don't know your life. But I do know that you did not come onto this earth to experience the expansion of this beautiful reality by doing it someone else's way. I know in my heart that you came here for something bigger. I know in my heart that you came to lead yourself and that you have everything you need inside of you to lead yourself instead of following what society and your community and your culture and the women and the expectations of you. Instead of following any of those things, get, you get to do it your way. You get to do life your way. And fuck it if no one agrees. Do you know how many times I get messages to this day? This is on another note. I still get messages to this day from certain people in my community saying, why do you swear so much on your podcast and on your channel? Why do you swear so much on social media? That's not ladylike. That takes away from it all. I don't like listening to you because you're swearing. And then, there was a moment where I was like, maybe they're right. Maybe I shouldn't be swearing so much. Maybe it's not sexy. And then I came back to myself again and I was like, nah, fuck it. I'm going to swear. Fuck it. I have done a great job up until now rebelling against all that has been expected of me, and I do not plan on stopping today. And it was just this it's been hilarious. I'm having so much fun with this because, you look back on your life and you're like all the things like you ever like go back and you like start looking at like all the different things that played out in your life and you're like, "Ah, now I know why that happened. Now I know what that was preparing me for. That relationship was preparing me for this thing, right? For the next relationship. The challenges I had with my parents. Now I know I'm meant to do something different. I'm meant to break generational trauma. I'm meant to lead my community in a different way. Now I get it. And it just becomes like just this hilarious thing to look back on because we took it so seriously back in the day, right? We were like, oh my God, nobody wants to be my friend. Nobody wants to, invite me to like parties or their community stuff that was happening. And I just look back at it now and I'm like, man, like I get it. I get why I went through that journey. And you ever feel like that where you're like, I get it. Like I went through all that shit so that I could just be me today and like do the things I'm meant to do and, go out there and like express myself in my uniqueness of who I am and why I was put on this earth. And it's just super cool. It's super cool to watch, all the different chapters of your life's journey build up and then unfold into the person that you're meant to be today. And so, I just can't emphasize enough like how important it is to do life your way, and I get it. You're like, ah, man, like, what if I'm outcasted? What if you get to show them a different way? What if you get to show your family that there is a different way of doing life? What if the very thing that you are rejecting in how you grew up is actually the very thing that your culture, your community, and your family needs to evolve and to expand? What if you are the black sheep so that you could create a new generation of love, connection, freedom, choice, truth, authenticity? What if that gets to be you? And if you feel like you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, that's me, I feel it, stay the course. Find the courage in your heart to be different. Find the courage in your heart to lead your own life. And I promise you that sometime down the road, you're going to receive messages saying thank you for not fitting in. Thank you for showing us a different way. Because if I can receive those messages, oh man, man, I don't even know your journey, but I already feel pumped. I already feel so excited for what's coming. That's what we get to do as the black sheep. That's what we get to do for our families, for our communities, for the generations to come. We get to show them a different way. Be the difference and watch you receive those messages thanking you for having the courage to do so. Thank you guys so much for today. My heart is full, and I just have so much gratitude for getting to do this every week. Like, I get to do this. I get to use my voice, and I get to speak up, and I get to have people listen on the other end. It's like this fucking magical thing that I get to do every single day. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, I created this life and you get to as well. It gets to be beautiful. So, thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you guys next week.